Now, another significant document that came to light was titled Executive Branch Minders, Intimidation of Witnesses. And I think that was found by Kevin Fenton. Can you tell us about this one? Well, first, can you tell us what government minders are? Tell us about this document. Tell us about what government minders are, and how did they affect the 9/11 Commission?
Sure. As part of the Commission's work, it wanted to interview a lot of people, ostensibly to learn about how the government actually functioned, not just how it was supposed to function. And, if you're doing an investigation, you want to get to the bottom of things, you want to get candid responses from people. But the people they're talking to, a lot of the lower, they talk to a lot of people, from the low level to the high. All the lower level people who could tell the Commission what they saw at their jobs on the day of 9/11, or in the years leading up to 9/11, if it's intelligence-related work. Day of 9/11 is more the FAA military response. But yeah, a lot of these lower-level people, like air traffic controllers, people in the military whose job it was to, respond to domestic crises like these hijackings, and the terrorist threats, and the FBI's, CIA's investigations and what they're supposed to be investigating regarding terrorist threats. A lot of lower-level people saw stuff, and so if you want to get candid responses, honest responses about what these people were witnesses to, probably going to want to interview them alone. You're definitely not going to want to interview them with anyone who might influence their responses or intimidate them in any way. However, all of these people, there was no interviews conducted where minders weren't present. And what minders were are these other representatives from the agency that witness, that employee works for, that were sent there by that employee's boss or people even higher up. And in practice, let me quote from Kevin Fenton's article about this, also posted at hcgroups.wordpress.com. And he quoted from this memo, which was written by Kevin Scheid, who's a senior staffer who led Team 2, and Lori Fenner, an Air Force intelligence officer, and lawyer Gordon Letterman. And this memo said that minders answered questions directed at witnesses. And minders, quote, acted as, quote, monitors reporting to their respective agencies on commission staff's lines of inquiry and witnesses' verbatim responses, end quote. And the staff thought this, quote, conveys to witnesses that their superiors will review their statements and may engage in retribution, end quote. And that the minders, quote, positioned themselves physically and have conducted themselves in a manner that we believe intimidates witnesses from giving full and candid responses to our questions, end quotes. So, given that these people acted this way in all of Team 2's interviews, it's not reasonable to believe that they got candid, honest, open responses to any serious lines of inquiry that they were trying to pursue. And given Zeliko's role in the staff's work, he may have insisted that they were throwing softball questions anyway. But these three staff members complained about this. And it wasn't just this incident either. There was another memo that also complained about minders interfering with their work in some different incident involving their work with Canada on parts of the investigation. And so we don't know exactly what went on with the minders and other staffs, but if this is any indication, it was similar. And Miles Carra, who was mentioned previously in this call, teammate, lead staff member, said that the minders were actually a great help to them in the investigation because they did help them understand what was going on with the government processes and what was supposed to be happening. They were useful in getting information that was needed and helping witnesses to understand how to communicate information.
Okay, I have something to say now.
Okay.
With regards to Miles Carra has become somewhat of a 9/11 debunker, and he seems to me like an apologist for the 9/11 Commission. The idea of government minders intimidating witnesses, the idea of anybody intimidating witnesses, to me, the whole government minder issue completely discredits the 9/11 Commission in my mind. And
even
you know what's
the appearance of it, regardless of whether they actually did influence anything, the fact that they were there taints the credibility of the Commission's work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, a lot of people in the 9/11 Truth Movement weren't even aware of the government minders until this document was found. But at the time of the 9/11 Commission, the 9/11 Family Steering Committee released several statements that addressed the minders. The families didn't want them there. And I'm going to go read to you some of their statements. This one is from September 10th, 2003. Quote, on August 27th, the Family Steering Committee received an update on the Commission's progress. We learned that there has been improved compliance from some government agencies and that minders continue to be present during interviews, even though the chairman and vice chairman publicly protested. Another one is from September 2003. Quote, the FSC, or the Family Steering Committee, is shocked with the use of minders in the interrogatory process. And despite the Commissioner's similar objections to minders, as stated at the last press conference, minders continue to be present during witness examination and questioning. The FSC does not want minders present during any witness examination and questioning. It is a form of intimidation, and it does not yield the unfettered truth. And the last one I'm going to read from them is from October 4th, 2003. Quote, when asked about minders by reporters, Chairman Kean admitted that in order to have access to the witnesses, the Commission had to accept the minders. He said the Commission staff believes no one has been intimidated by their presence. Chairman Hamilton, however, added the caveat that it is very difficult to tell when a witness is being intimidated by a minder. To preclude any hint of intimidation, no minders should be present during the interviews. This should not be negotiable, end quote. So obviously, the 9/11 family members were furious that they were there. They did not want them there, and they were still there. Now, I have a quote from Colleen Raleigh, actually. It's a very short quote, and she says, quote, and there are minders in government that every time you're interviewed, I was never interviewed by myself, end quote. And that's Colleen Raleigh. So, as I said, to me, the issue of government minders just completely, it's one of the many things that completely discredits the 9/11 Commission in my mind.
Exactly. And a couple points on that. Kean in early July 2003, he, quote, in a press briefing, I think the Commission feels unanimously that it's some intimidation to have somebody sitting behind you all the time who you either work for or who works for your agency. You might get less testimony than you would. And that's the chairman of the Commission saying that in July 2003. However, by September 23rd of that year, at another press briefing, he had changed his tune, basically saying, quote, talking to staff, what they have told me is that they've done these interviews, that the interviewees are encouragingly frank, that they by and large have not seemed to be intimidated in any way in their answers. I'm glad to hear that it's from the staff that they don't feel it's inhibiting the process of the interviews. And that was 9 days before the this Minders memo, executive branch intimidation of witnesses. It was the subject of the article.
Well, Kean has on a number of occasions changed his tune.
Yeah.
I can't remember any references off the top of my head, but I remember him saying one thing, as if he was for the families, as if he was, really trying to find out what happened, and then, a week later he'll say something completely contrary to what he had already said, which indicates to me that he had a talking to, by someone to change his tune.
Yeah.
But I have no proof of that. It just sounds like it.